So, let's begin! This is a video response to the show The Ten Commandments, performed by Roberto Benigni on one of the main Italian TV channels, Rai Uno, on the 15th and 16th December 2014, and seen by 10 million people. The show had the same structure of his previous shows, some satire, a generic explanation of the topic, and finally an in-depth explanation. So why this response? Because I haven't seen any videos, and it doesn't mean there aren't any, but I haven't seen them, answering him in detail. I read several opinions, reviews, usually positive, and someone was even brave enough to define that thing, refined theology. There can only be one reaction. Among the negative reviews, the criticisms were usually about the lack of respect for Catholic dogma, or he said something the church wouldn't have accepted, or that simply he was boring. Someone also defined him, and I agree of course, theologically weak. However, as far as I've seen, no one said anything about the bullshits and the inventions he completely made up. Someone made some short videos criticizing his theology, but it was still from a theist point of view or from a conspiracy perspective, and they were mostly from, I don't know, born again or evangelists or stuff like that. Some of the mistakes were actually shown, but they were essentially saying, "My religion is right, your religion is wrong," which is not what I want to do, of course. The reason why I'm doing these videos in English is because Benigni behaved like one of the many evangelists infesting American TVs, with the lies and appeals to ignorance, and I'd like to show on the other side of the ocean that we're not in a much better situation. Our TVs crawl with comedians pretending to be intellectuals, and above all the Catholic Church. But this situation is not really different. The church is so much into Italian culture that people feel guilty to address lies and logical fallacies. Well, as far as I know at least. I mean, neither church, nor Rai, nor Benigni are exactly famous for accepting criticisms. And although I'm not saying this happened, I wouldn't be surprised if there had been some censorship. Lastly, let me remind this video is for criticism and teaching only. I'm not using the whole original video, which I also do not claim any ownership on, because I would never say those things, and thus, according to both Italian and American laws, this video cannot be removed. So, let's finally start with the analysis. First of all, I am aware Benigni is a comedian and a showman, but this does not allow him to pretend logical fallacies and lies are true. I won't comment on jokes, some of which were also funny, but I will comment on statements that were made as jokes, but then treated as if they were real. I'll be talking about the Old Testament. I won't be too literal, of course, and when possible I'll keep the context used by Benigni, giving some benefit of the doubt, of course. This is because some Christian denominations, including Catholic Church and surely Benigni, don't take the Bible literally, interpreting where useful and claiming some verses are poetry. Someone could say this is a way to make the Bible say whatever you want, maybe even the Ten Commandments. However, I will just comment on what is being said, provide a larger context and a more objective view of things. As I was saying, I'll be using the Old Testament. This is because in the New Testament, God does not really appear much, if not through his supposed earthly incarnation. And I say it's supposed because even among Christian denominations, there are some doubts about Jesus actually claiming to be God's incarnation. Also, the commandments, all 613 of them, because there are not just 10, are in the Old Testament, and if Benigni takes those for real, he must take the rest as such. Also, the Old Testament is the only one recognized by all Christian denominations, by Judaism, where he's taking some of his interpretations from. In fact, the Pentateuch and the Torah are the exact same thing, and the commandments are in the Pentateuch. Additionally, the Old Testament is also recognized by Islam. In fact, in the Quran, Allah often says, "Do you remember when I did this and that?" referring to episodes of the Old Testament. People saying Yahweh and Allah are not the same God have just been served. Baboom! And so the show begins. Music for Benigni and off we go! Terrible politicians and, well, I'll just keep the satire. Just a few minutes anyway. Benigni starts with the main topic.
Allora vediamo Dio, i 10 comandamenti. Noi ragazzi, l'argomento ragazzi è serio, serissimo. Ora va bene finché ho fatto Dante, la Costituzione, ma i 10 comandamenti?
Okay, this is his opinion and I respect it as such. But he cannot say this as if it was objectively true. The Italian constitution, defined by him as the most beautiful in the world, grants, at least in theory, freedom and rights, demands peace and regulates people's life and their relationship with the government. The Divine Comedy is one of the best poetical texts in the world. Its beauty is undeniable and undenied by critics. Such a long text is almost never so precise and refined, or such a modern reading even after so many centuries. The Bible is a text full of repetitions, contradictions, translation mistakes, describing an angry, moody God with little patience and a huge ego, ruling on his chosen people in the attempt to make them to be the best in the world. People from other tribes and women are considered inferior beings, and whoever belongs to this population needs to accept absurd laws and extreme punishments. No, Benigni, the Constitution is much better than the Bible because of its content, and the Divine Comedy thanks to its form.
E infatti stasera noi risponderemo una volta per tutte a tutte quelle domande che sono anni che ce la facciamo, a cui nessuno ha mai dato risposta. Ci siamo preparati. Primo, se Dio c'è o non c'è, lo definiremo una volta per tutti. Dove si va dopo morti, se esiste l'anima, se c'è la vita dopo la morte, e dell'aldilà. Insomma, tutte queste. Stasera risponderemo a tutte. Abbiamo preso 2 serate con calma. Quindi non vorrei che alla fine della serata a qualcuno rimane il dubbio, ma Dio c'è o non c'è. Dobbiamo chiarire tutto.
Great. Keep that in mind.
La pagina della Bibbia in cui Dio modella con le sue stesse mani il corpo dell'uomo e della donna è indimenticabile.
Oh yes, so unforgettable that it's impossible to understand what he's talking about. Is he referring to that half verse, Genesis 1:27, in which the author just says, male and female he created them? No references to shaping with hands or anything like that. Or is he referring to the second tale of creation? Yes, because in case you didn't know, there are 2, and they contradict each other regardless of what apologists say. And this is just the beginning of the Bible. In the second story, we are just told that God creates the woman from Adam's rib. None of the 2 stories seems particularly unforgettable, unless it's forcefully drilled in your brain, but surely not because of its poetical value.
Il corpo umano è capolavoro di Dio. Vabbè, ora non guardate me, dico in generale, insomma, è la cosa più bella che ha fatto.
Benigni. Oh, my little Benigni. No, no, no. First of all, even assuming God's existence, I really hope you're not saying evolution did not happen. God did not make us like this. Even assuming, and it's very unlikely, that abiogenesis finds out that God started everything, this God created the very first things that eventually caused, in billions of years, the existence of millions of species, including human beings. Okay, someone could say God made every single species and we are his best, to quote Benigni. However, that someone should also explain, just to make a couple of examples, that we have a a pretty much useless appendix that can cause death if burst, that we can be killed by microscopic creatures, also made by God, and our eyes, they're a mess, and they can be used only thanks to a brain's compensation, and that our brain allows us to think and reason thanks to a mutation, making us also more prone to get cancer. We could mention goosebumps are basically useless as much as wisdom teeth, and there is almost an infinite list of details and things that make us far from masterpieces. And if we really are the best God can make, well, I'm not impressed. And yes, I know many of you are thinking God didn't want to impress you, but it still is a terrible creation. Human beings can make much better. After that, there's a long list of unsupported claims based on nothing. And then?
Non c'è niente di più salutare per l'anima, per la mente, che parlare proprio di queste cose incomprensibili, misteriose, che non si capisce niente. Proprio Dio, l'eternità, l'infinito, cose che non ne parla mai nessuno.
Well, I speak about it all the time. Philosophy and some sciences do it too. They just don't speak about it how you like it. Could this be the reason why you say no one does? Because they disagree with you? Cosmology wonders about the idea of an infinite universe. Also, infinite is a mathematical concept. Sorry, dude, but religion is not the keeper of deep topics. Even if it had begun the conversation, this is only because religion was the only way to have a culture until not so many years ago. This culture was also imposed and filtered by the same religious people. Have you ever heard of Galileo? Giordano Bruno? When religion stopped being the only keeper of culture, we have been able to correct previous knowledge, learn, know, reason, really understand what surrounds us, without being forced to accept any unchangeable dogma imposed by an old book. Could this be the reason why religion has always been so jealous of knowledge? And no, don't even try to say the big names in science were religious people, and this means religion did a lot for science. Those big names had no choice but to be religious. All of this happened despite of religion.
Perché a noi italiani ci piace proprio parlare di Dio, la religione ce l'abbiamo proprio radicata dentro noi.
I agree. This is exactly the problem.
Non so se avete notato che tutte le religioni promettono una ricompensa. Siamo proprio avidi, interessati. Gratis noi non facciamo niente.
They are just quoting your God, Benigni. Who do you think is promising rewards in the afterlife for what you do in this life? It's in the book next to you. You're about to talk about it.
Tante volte si dice no, gli uomini sono cattivi. Ma l'uomo è come Dio l'ha fatto.
Oh, do you mean in his image?
Noi stasera crediamo in Dio tutti. Ragazzi, noi andiamo al cinema a vedere Batman, Zorro, l'Uomo Ragno e ci crediamo. Stiamo 2 ore a vedere, l'Uomo Ragno si trasforma, si cose, e mi fate storie su Dio. No, dico, credete all'Uomo Ragno e non credete a Dio.
I can't believe they clapped. Anyway, if we are talking about God as a fictional character and we analyze him in the context of the universe created in his fiction, yeah, why not? I agree. The problem is when in the name of that fictional character we spend public money to finance worship sites instead of hospitals, schools, places that can provide an objective and provable help. The problem is when those who claim this being exists manipulate public opinion and laws on the sole basis of a book written in the Bronze Age. The problem is when the cheerleaders of this being get tax reliefs, donation, punishment exemptions, and when his name is used to commit atrocities, and yes, I know you are going to talk about it, but I'll answer. The problem is when you teach blind faith as a virtue, while reasoning, the wish to understand, curiosity, become flaws. And if you want to criticize this, think for a second, what was the red fruit in the Garden of Eden? It was the fruit of knowledge. Adam and Eve were punished because they wanted to know. Of course, I'm not saying that really happened, but you can't deny this is the foundation of the book, and thus of the religion coming from that book. Benigni, there's even worse. The problem with your reasoning is that many people, as you did just a few minutes ago, claim we should derive our moral laws from that fictional book. If this happened with Spider-Man, I would complain in the same way. Finally, neither Spider-Man nor the villains of his universe are as cruel and perverse as your Bible God, regardless of your later claims, as we'll see. Oh, I almost forgot. Benigni, Spider-Man does not change shape. It's a mask.